Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in. They came in silence, sliding out of the blackness of space like shadows with teeth. The Varnock fleet did not roar or shine with bright colors. It simply appeared, 30 ships, sleek and sharp, shaped like knives meant to cut through the stars. Their hulls were dark silver, smooth as glass, with markings that told stories of battles won and worlds crushed. At the center of the fleet was the flagship Devourer, longer than a city and armored so thick it looked like nothing could break it. Inside, the Varnock command crew worked quietly. They didn't shout orders. They didn't panic. They were warriors, bred for war, born to conquer. This planet, green, soft, full of life, would fall just like the others. There was no doubt, no fear. Commander Zarn stood at the front of the bridge, 4 red eyes scanning the glowing planet below. His claws tapped the metal railing in a slow, steady rhythm. The invasion had begun before the planet even knew it was being invaded. No warnings, no demands. That was the Varnock way. They did not speak to prey. "Deploy the first wave," Zarn said. His voice was low and dry, like stone sliding across stone. "Clean it." Dozens of landing craft peeled off from the larger ships and dropped into the atmosphere like fiery needles. The clouds swallowed them. No resistance, no signal, just silence. Zarn liked that. Silence meant fear. Silence meant they were winning. He turned back to the holomap of the planet and watched as their forces spread across the surface like a stain. Another world, another victory. The Varnock dropships sliced through the upper atmosphere, their hulls glowing red from the heat of entry. Wind screamed against their sides, but the pilots didn't flinch. They were used to this. Born in metal, raised in fire, they had landed on 100 worlds and crushed every one. This planet would be no different. Below, forests stretched for miles. Rivers curled like silver veins through the land. Cities blinked quietly in the dark, still asleep, unaware, unprepared. The first dropship slammed into the earth just outside one of the major population zones, a city with tall towers and soft yellow lights. The ground shook. Trees splintered. Animals scattered in panic. The ship's ramp hissed as it opened, steam pouring out in waves. Then came the soldiers. Varnock foot soldiers stood over 8 feet tall, their skin armored with thick plated scales that shimmered like oil. Each one carried a plasma spear and a wrist-mounted shredder cannon. They moved without speaking, their heavy steps crushing the ground beneath them. Behind them came the crawlers, 4-legged war machines with spiked backs and mouths that glowed with red light. They did not bark orders or shout warnings. They simply moved forward, spreading across the landscape like ink spilled on paper. The first city didn't even put up a fight. Defense systems flickered online too late. Shield barriers glowed, then snapped like twigs. Automated turrets spun up, but were torn apart before they fired a shot. Civilian signals flooded the airwaves. Cries for help, emergency beacons, voices full of panic. But none reached safety. The Varnock jammed communications before they landed. The people tried to run. They fled in transports, in hovercraft, on foot. But the skies burned behind them. Streets turned to glass. Buildings cracked, toppled, burned. Commander Zarn watched from orbit, eyes narrowed. He studied the city as it fell, watching the fires spread in slow, curling spirals. He was not impressed. He was not excited. It was routine, expected, Victory was never the surprise. Only delay was. First zone neutralized came the voice of his second-in-command, Shear. Minimal resistance. Estimated 70% of the population has been cleared. Zarn didn't smile. Varnock didn't smile. But his voice darkened with satisfaction. Sweep the outposts. Burn the roads. No survivors. On the planet below, more dropships rained from the sky. A second city lost power before the first Varnock boots touched the ground. The local power grid blinked and died, plunging entire sectors into blackness. The invaders used the dark like a weapon. They moved fast, blending into shadow, slicing through barriers and bunkers with quiet, terrifying precision. People fought back. Some had old weapons, family relics, or emergency armories meant for things like riots or wild beasts. None of them mattered. The Varnock cut through them like cloth. It wasn't a battle. It was a message. This planet was falling. Fast. High above, in the orbiting flagship, Zarn watched as the final light signals of organized resistance went dark one by one. His claws curled around the arm of his command chair. "It's too easy," he muttered. Gir tilted his head. "Would you prefer a challenge?" Zarn didn't answer. He stared at the map again. Something itched at the edge of his thoughts. It wasn't fear. Varnock didn't fear, but it was tension, pressure, a shape he couldn't name. Then a flicker on the sensor display. Just a flicker. A single line of static. A blip too fast to be tracked. Too sharp to be natural. "What was that?" he snapped. A nearby technician checked the instruments. "Nothing, Commander." A sensor echo. Possibly an asteroid shard reflecting our scans. "Or possibly not," Zarn said. He stood slowly. His eyes stayed fixed on that corner of space, the one that had flickered. "Send a scout drone," he ordered. "I want visual confirmation." A small, orb-shaped craft launched silently from the underside of the Devourer, cutting through the stars toward the black. Its cameras blinked on. It scanned, swept, zoomed. Nothing. Empty space. But then the feed glitched. A sudden static burst. Then the image cleared for just 1 second. And something was there. Not a Varnock ship. Not Council tech. Not anything he recognized. It was long. Dark. Covered in scars and armor that looked patched, not printed. It hovered in the dark, like a ghost from a forgotten war. And it wasn't moving. It was waiting. Then the screen went black. The drone feed ended. No data. No signal. Just silence. But that same itch deep in Zarn's chest. That nameless pressure. It flared again. He leaned forward, claws tapping faster. "Bring the fleet into red alert. I want all long-range weapons armed, right now." "But Commander," Shear said, "the invasion is going perfectly. We don't need—" "Do it," Zarn growled. And far out in the darkness, the shape that wasn't supposed to be there began to shift. Slowly, quietly, coming alive. The Varnock fleet began to reposition. It was subtle at first. A few ships adjusted orbit. Weapons turned outward instead of downward. Engines pulsed with a low hum. Shields shifted to high-density mode. The soldiers on the ground didn't know why. They were too busy finishing the sweep, torching whatever structure still stood, rounding up survivors for study or execution. But on the Devourer, in the command deck, high above, Tension spread like frost on glass. Commander Zarn stood at the front viewport, arms behind his back, his reflection just a faint shadow against the cold stars. The last transmission from the scout drone played again. That single second of video, that strange silhouette, no insignia, no council registry, no energy signature that matched known drive types. But it was real. He had seen it. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't static. And worse, it had watched the drone before the feed cut. "Track the sector again," Zarn ordered, his voice low. "Every scan array we have, I want confirmation, or I want an excuse." Technicians moved quickly, fingers tapping on curved, glowing panels. Scanners lit up. Probes reached into deep space like invisible fingers stretching for answers. Nothing. "Still no contact, Commander," Sear reported. "If it was a ship, it's gone." "No," Zarn said flatly. "It's still there. Ships don't move like that unless they want to be seen. And we were meant to see it." For the first time in 1,000 campaigns, Zarn felt something sharp curl behind his thoughts. Not fear. Not yet. But curiosity. The kind of curiosity that hunters feel when the prey they've chased into a corner bares teeth they didn't expect. Down on the planet, the third city had begun to fall. Civilian transports were being grounded. Defense nodes collapsed. A few surviving soldiers attempted to regroup and hold a mountain pass near the equator. A last stand. It was crushed in minutes. The Varnock didn't waste time on the brave. But even on the ground, reports were starting to spread. Whispers, uncertainty, rumors that their own fleet was pausing, shifting, watching something out in the stars, something they weren't talking about. Then, a sound. It didn't come through the usual sensors, not through scanners or radar or long-range transmissions. It came through space itself, a pulse, a low-frequency hum that wasn't heard but felt. Everyone noticed it. Zarn froze. "What was that?" he asked, though the question was already pointless. Because outside the Devourer's bridge, the stars bent. It started as a ripple. Space didn't flash or break open, like in the old war logs. It just folded, like cloth pinched between invisible fingers. One moment, there was nothing. The next, a ship slid through the tear like it had always been there. Long, black, burned in places, quiet. No bright lights, no welcome signal, no warning. Only one thing was visible, a name carved into the hull in deep scarred letters, not printed, not etched neatly like council ships. It was scratched, rough, angry. HSS Dreadstar. Jur leaned closer to the viewport, his voice barely a whisper. "That's human." Zarn didn't respond. He didn't need to, because the name said everything. The humans had returned, and they had brought that. For a moment, no one moved. No weapons fired. No calls were made. The Varnock ships drifted in defensive formation, trying to understand what they were seeing. The Dreadstar didn't move. It just hovered, silent, patient. Its armor was uneven, some plates mismatched like they'd been torn from other ships. Its engines glowed faint blue, but nothing else lit up. No signal, no demands, not even a scan. Zarn spoke finally. "Get me every file on human warships, anything from the old archives. I want to know what we're looking at." Jur was already trying. His eyes darted across displays, but the systems were struggling. It's not on the Council grid. The Accord classified most human weapon records before the exile. We've got names, a few blurry images from the first Exodus, but no specs. Zarn's jaw clenched. No specs means no weakness. Then suddenly the Dreadstar moved. Not fast. Just a shift. A slight turn, like a predator stretching before the kill. And then it powered its weapons, but not like the Varnock. There were no energy flares, no charging lights, just a sound. Deep, mechanical, like steel chains tightening under pressure. A low thrum filled the comms. Then, silence again. And then, one shot. Not from a beam cannon, not from a plasma launcher. It was a slug, solid metal, fired so fast it warped the space around it. It hit the nearest Varnock frigate mid-hull. The entire ship folded in half. No explosion, no fire, just a crack in space, and then silence. The rest of the fleet moved instantly. Alarms screamed. Weapons fired. Varnock ships lit up the black sky with waves of energy blasts and missiles. The Dreadstar vanished. 1 second it was there. The next, it slipped sideways, out of the line of fire, like a shadow flickering past a candle. It reappeared behind a destroyer and fired again. Another ship gone. Zarn didn't speak. He didn't have to. His crew was already in motion. Commands shouted. Formations tightened. Ships fell back toward the main carrier group. Ground troops were ordered to hold position and brace for planetary counterattack. But inside Zarn's mind, something sharp had begun to spread. Humans weren't supposed to be here. They weren't supposed to have ships. They weren't supposed to be this dangerous. He watched as the Dreadstar tore another ship apart with a railcore shot that left a spiraling hole in space itself. The Varnock had faced beasts, machines, entire fleets of automated drones. But this was different. This wasn't war. This was personal. The bridge of the Devourer was no longer quiet. Warnings flashed red across every screen. Hull reports, fleet damage, impact maps. Ships were being destroyed, not disabled. Varnock technology was designed to endure. Redundant shields, regenerative armor, reactive AI protocols, but none of it mattered now. Whatever weapon the Dreadstar was using, it didn't just bypass defenses. It ignored them, like they weren't even there. One round, one kill. Always the same. Always clean. Like a predator hunting for sport, not survival. Zarn's voice cut through the chaos. Pull back second formation. Fan the cruisers. Get behind planetary cover if you have to. But sir? Sear began, but Zarn cut him off with a snarl. We are not going to fight this thing in open space, not blind, not with guesses. He turned toward the tactical display. The Dreadstar was still on the move, dancing through the fleet like it had written the battle plan itself. It didn't broadcast intentions. It didn't even target command ships directly. It was picking them off randomly. At least that's what it looked like. But Zarn had fought too many wars to believe in randomness. Number, the Dreadstar, was testing them, measuring their response time, calculating weaknesses, learning. He had to respect that. He hated it, but he respected it. On the planet's surface, Varnock ground commanders were receiving new orders. Dig in, fortify the perimeter, expect counter-invasion. It made no sense. The humans had only sent one ship. One. But the sight of it alone was enough to change the strategy. Entire divisions shifted their attention skyward. The slaughter slowed. Survivors were no longer being executed. They were being held as potential assets, as if the Varnock finally believed that maybe, just maybe, this planet wasn't as helpless as it seemed. On the Devourer, the sensors flared again. "Reappearance," a technician shouted. "Sector 5K, 30 kilometers aft." Zarn spun to the viewport. The Dreadstar had blinked back into view behind their heavy assault barge, the Drift Claw. One of their toughest ships, fully armored, loaded with core fusion cannons. It could crack a planetary shield in a single volley. It never got the chance. The Dreadstar fired a different weapon this time, not the rail core. Something slower, meaner. A pulse launcher that twisted space around the bolt as it traveled. The shot moved like it was alive, rippling through reality, humming like a broken bell. It hit. The Drift Claw stopped moving. Its lights went dead. Its cannons froze. Then, without warning, the ship collapsed inward. Not exploded. Collapsed, like gravity had suddenly remembered it existed. A silent implosion. No fire. Just silence and ruin. On the bridge of the Devourer, no one spoke. Zarn's claws dug into the edge of the console. His voice was quiet now, controlled. "That ship is old tech," he muttered. "Patchwork hull, manual fire controls. They're not using AI assists. No beacon pings, no signal tags. It's like a ghost, a war ghost." "Commander," Shear said slowly, "what do we do?" Zarn didn't answer immediately. He watched as the Dreadstar vanished again, this time leaving behind a trail of shattered debris that used to be one of their escort carriers. Only 20 ships remained of the original 30, and the humans, they'd only brought one. "We bait it," Zarn finally said. "Force it into atmosphere. Ground battle. Close quarters. That ship's too fast out here. Too slippery. But it won't survive under pressure." Shear nodded. "I'll begin forming a planetary ambush pattern." "No," Zarn growled. "We won't wait." He leaned forward, tapping in a manual command. "Send a transmission. Old Earth frequency. Keep it simple." Shear blinked. "You're going to talk to them?" "No," Zarn said. "I'm going to challenge them." The signal went out. It was crude, staticky, and in a language the Council had stopped using decades ago. But the humans would understand. That much Zarn was sure of. To the vessel hiding behind stolen stars, face us. If you are more than myth, prove it. Come down, show us your war. The bridge went quiet. A minute passed. Then 2. Nothing. And then, without a sound, without any warning, the Dreadstar began to descend. No escort, no backup. It dropped toward the planet like it didn't care what was waiting below. As it broke through the cloud line, the skies turned dark. Not from weather, from power. The ship's energy signature distorted the air. Lightning sparked across its hull, but it didn't slow. The Varnock anti-air batteries opened fire. Plasma blasts, ground-to-air missiles, rail bursts. None of it touched the Dreadstar. It weaved through every shot like it could see the future. Then it landed. Not gently. Not cleanly. It crashed, burying its nose in the rocky plain near the Varnock staging camp. Dust filled the air. Metal groaned. For a moment, everything stopped. Then the ramp opened. A figure walked out. Not in bright armor, not in a shining suit. She wore a scratched combat vest, one shoulder scorched, one boot dragging slightly from old injury. Her face was marked with a long scar, and her eyes were made of steel, not the metal kind, the real kind, cold, sharp, unmoving. She looked at the Varnock platoon gathered to greet her. 100 soldiers, 3 walkers, 2 crawlers. She didn't flinch. She just said 3 words. Calm, quiet, certain. You called us. And then the sky exploded. The explosion didn't come from above. It came from beneath. Buried under the plains, hidden under layers of compact rock and dust, a series of dormant mines activated the moment the Dreadstar's ramp lowered. The ground lit up in a web of energy veins, blue cracks spreading in jagged violent lines, then erupted into a storm of dirt and fire. The blast was controlled, timed with precision so that it spread outward, away from the human ship, catching the surrounding Varnock forces in a sudden, blistering inferno. The walkers toppled first, massive metal beasts built for siege warfare. Their legs snapped like twigs under the force of the shock wave. The crawlers tried to retreat, hissing as their limb pistons screamed and sparks burst from their undercarriages. Too late. One flipped end over end, tumbling through the air before slamming into a ridge and crumpling like foil. Of the 100 Varnock soldiers that had surrounded the ship, barely 20 scrambled out of the blast zone, dazed and coughing through smoke that stank of melted metal and burning flesh. Commander Zarn watched all of it through a real-time feed, projected across the Devourer's main screen. The camera drone captured everything: the fire, the screams, the sound of falling machinery. And at the center of it all, still standing on the lowered ramp of the Dreadstar, was the human, unmoved, unshaken. Her hair blew slightly in the smoke wind. Her hand rested on the sidearm at her hip, but she hadn't drawn it. She hadn't needed to. That was a trap, Seer said in disbelief. Our trap. They triggered it like they knew it was there. Zarn didn't answer. He narrowed his eyes, studying the woman. What do we know about her? He asked. Scanning facial structure now, one of the bridge crew reported, running comparisons to old Accord records. Match found. Commander Nova Ryal. Human Ground Command. Presumed deceased 20 years ago during the fall of Kepler Outpost. Zarn's jaw tightened. Presumed, he echoed. He watched as Nova stepped down from the ramp onto the bloodied earth. Her boots crunched over broken Varnock armor. One of the surviving soldiers lunged at her, claws out, screaming in a language made for war cries. She didn't draw her weapon. She ducked, spun, caught the creature mid-charge by the throat. With a single motion, she slammed it into the ground. The Varnock's body convulsed once, then stopped moving. The others hesitated, and she looked at them, not with rage or arrogance, but with something worse. Pity. Run, she said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. They did. Every surviving Varnock turned and bolted, scrambling for cover, tripping over debris, abandoning weapons, forgetting their training. Fear had turned them from predators into prey. Zarn watched in stunned silence as she turned her eyes toward the drone feed, toward him. And for a moment, it felt like she could see through the screen. Cut the feed, he ordered, but the text didn't move fast enough. Nova raised her arm slowly and pointed directly at the drone, not in warning, not in threat, in invitation. Then the screen went dark. Zarn turned slowly toward the rest of the bridge. Every officer was still, waiting for his reaction. He looked calm, but inside, a storm churned behind his eyes. "She's not alone," he said. "Commander?" Zir asked. "She wouldn't come unless she was certain, unless this was a message." "What kind of message?" Zarn stepped away from the viewport and faced them. "The humans are back." He walked toward the center platform, where the fleet map hovered above a circular table. He gestured and pulled up planetary scans, shifting through energy readings and seismic data. "She's not the tip of the spear," Zarn said. "She is the spear, the first strike, which means the blade is still coming." At that moment, across the outer edge of the solar system, sensors began to blink. Dozens of them, then hundreds. One by one, warp signatures appeared, small at first, then larger, and larger still. A fleet, but not a council fleet. This one had no registry, no call signs, just blips on the radar, silent, approaching. The sensor officer's voice cracked. "Incoming vessels, human design, multiple classes, frigate, cruiser, carrier, unknown types. We're detecting, Commander, we're detecting over 100 separate signals." The bridge fell into stunned silence. Then a second reading appeared. Behind the first wave of ships, something massive was emerging. Zarn leaned forward, watching as the radar pulse tried to scan it. At first, it showed nothing. Then too much. An energy core brighter than a star. Hull readings thicker than anything in their database. Weapons arrays that couldn't even be fully mapped because they extended into folded space. The ship's name blinked onto the screen, only for a moment. HSS Revenant. And under it, the designation, Fleet Flagship, Earth Command, Retribution Class. Zarn exhaled slowly. "Contact all remaining forces on the surface," he said. "Tell them to regroup, fall back, dig in." Shear looked at him. "You're ordering a retreat?" Zarn's voice turned colder than the void outside the hull. "I'm preparing for war." The sky above the planet turned black. Not from nightfall. From ships. Row upon row of human vessels dropped from warp space, descending like iron rain across the horizon. They didn't arrive with fanfare. They didn't blare trumpets or play hero. They just appeared. Fleet formations locking into place with silent, ruthless efficiency. Frigates darted like knives. Cruisers moved with thunder. And above them all, blotting out stars with its enormous mass, floated the HSS Revenant. It didn't drift. It hovered. The way a mountain hovers in a dream. Immense. Ancient. Ready. The Varnock forces scrambled to respond. Planetary defenses spun to face the sky. Atmospheric cannons fired bursts into the clouds, hoping to strike something, anything, before it got close. Anti-orbital mines detonated in preemptive panic. The command outposts began screaming warnings across every frequency. But none of it mattered. The Revenant didn't dodge. It simply opened fire. One shot. A blue lance of compressed energy, pulsing with fusion plasma, tore down from its forward cannon and carved a burning trench across the surface, miles long, glowing with molten stone. A Varnock supply base vanished. Not even rubble remained. Another beam followed, then another. The earth shook. The atmosphere burned. It wasn't a battle. It was judgment. Commander Zarn watched from the Devourer, his face lit by the glow of the annihilation below. He didn't bark orders. He didn't snarl. There was no point. The truth had already become clear. The humans had never been gone. They had simply waited. And now, they had come back to finish what the galaxy started. A voice cut through the noise, a transmission, broadcast from the Revenant's command deck. This is Earth Command. Stand down, lay down your weapons, leave this planet, and never return. Zarn stepped toward the console. Respond, he growled. No response channel open, the text said. It's a one-way message. The screen shifted again. A face appeared. Commander Nova Ryal, bloodied from battle, one arm hanging limp at her side. Her eyes, those same cold, storm-scarred eyes, stared into the camera. We warned you, she said. You didn't listen. Then the transmission ended. Below, on the battlefield, Varnock soldiers began to retreat. Not ordered, not coordinated, just fear. For the first time in generations, the Varnock were running. And in orbit, the human fleet let them. Because this wasn't about killing every last Varnock. This was about showing the galaxy one thing. Earth was not prey. They never had been. And they never would be. The Devourer turned slowly, its engines firing to retreat. Zarn stood at the helm, jaw clenched, every instinct screaming that this wasn't over. And it wasn't. Because as the Revenant turned away, its side lit with the words, "Never again," a final pulse pinged across the Varnock fleet. A message from Earth, short, uncoded. We're watching. Days later, the Council reconvened for the first time in decades. There were no speeches, no ceremony, only silence as Commander Nova Ryal entered the chamber. She wore no armor now, no medals, only her scars, and the room stood. Not in fear, but in respect. No one questioned Earth's place anymore, because the humans hadn't just survived exile. They had ended the war. And now the galaxy listened when they spoke. Peace returned, but not as fragile silence, easily broken. This time, peace came in the shadow of human warships. And it would last. Because everyone knew, if it didn't, the Revenant would return.